Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning to our in-person audience and our virtual audience. I'm Mark Nykirk, and I'm at the Scripps Howard Center for Civic Engagement at Northern Kentucky University. We are one of the partners with the three public library districts in Northern Kentucky to bring you the Northern Kentucky Forum to discuss public affairs in our community. I want to let you know that in August, we have three forums that I invite you to take a look at. They're going to be small group discussions and one in each of the counties, Boone, Kenton, and Campbell, to talk about local media. There's been a sea change in the landscape of local media, and we want to hear from our residents about what you're reading, where you're reading it, what you would like to see that the local media is not delivering for you. So these are small group discussions. You can sign up for one in Boone, Kenton, or Campbell County. So just go to NKYForum.org and you'll see those dates on there in mid-August, and you can pick a time and location that works for you. We'd love to have your voice. We are at the Kenton County Public Library Erlanger branch this morning, one of the Kenton County Public Library being one of our partners. And so we're grateful to be here and to be with all of you. What we're doing this morning, the forum has tried to bring community leaders to the public so that you can meet the people that are the thought leaders and public institution leaders in our community. And this morning we have Lindsey Rechtin, who is, I find myself saying, the new director of the Northern Kentucky Water District, but she's actually been in this role for almost 2 years now, and with the Water District as an accountant before that. So she's a veteran of the Water District. As most of you know, in Northern Kentucky, even though we have 3 counties and a number of cities, much of our public services are delivered by districts. Tank delivering public transportation, and the sanitation district, sewage, and a convention and visitors bureau. And the Water District is serving Boone, Kenton, and part of Boone County, as well as Pendleton and Grant, right?
Yeah, Pendleton, Bullock, and Walton.
So I'll let Lindsey tell you about that a little more, but it hasn't always been so. In the earlier days of water districts, every city seemed to have a water district, but as a community, we came together and said, let's see what we can do together. And so here we are now with the Northern Kentucky Water District. It's been an interesting 2 years in Lindsey's time in the nation with regard to water. We've seen what happened in Flint and New Palestine, and of course, Eastern Kentucky here in our state faced water challenges after the floods. So I think a lot of the work involves not just making sure that the tap works today, but that we're well guarded against potential problems and that arise. So quick organizational note, we'll take questions. Those of you in the audience need only raise your hand. Those of you online, there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Type your question there. We will monitor that and ask Lindsey at the end of the presentation your questions. So thank you, and please join me in welcoming Lindsey Rechtin.
Good morning. I am Lindsey Rechtin, President and CEO of Northern Kentucky Water District. I'd like to thank the Northern Kentucky Forum for hosting us and inviting me to be here to speak today. I'd also like to thank the participants for your interest in learning more about the district and our processes. So to give you a little background as to what we'll be talking about today, we'll talk a little bit about who we are, give you an idea of about us, an overview of our water treatment processes, the challenges we face, and then we'll touch on a few of our recent and upcoming projects. So as I mentioned, I am Lindsey Rechtin. My background is in accounting. I served as the finance manager from 2013 till January of 2016. And then from 2016 to 2022, I was the Vice President of Finance and Support Services and involved in all of the rate making, bond issuing, financial projecting, monthly reporting, customer service, and then I oversaw the annual budget of more than $60 million. And then I did transition full-time into the President CEO position of August of 2022, and I served as incoming before that for a full year, and we did a one-year transition. Now, as President CEO, I do oversee all of the managerial, operational functions of the district. I lead and manage the district in the accomplishment of our goals and objectives and our strategic planning that's established in cooperation with our Board of Commissioners. I do have a bachelor's of business administration and accountancy from Eastern Kentucky University, and I am a certified public accountant in the state of Kentucky. I'm a member of the Kentucky Society of CPAs, and I was recently appointed to the Water Research Foundation as a board member, and I also serve as a board member of the Association of Metropolitan Water Agencies. Stacy Campson is now our Vice President of Finance and Support Services. She took on the role when I stepped into this role. Her responsibilities now include financial reporting, the administration of our grant and loan applications. She now has oversight of our annual budget, and she oversees our customer service and distribution departments. A few interesting facts about her departments: our call center employees take nearly 25,000 calls per year. And our billing department sends out nearly 350,000 bills per year. Amy Stouffer is our Vice President of Engineering, Production, and Water Quality. Her responsibilities include engineering services as they relate to new infrastructure, new water towers, water treatment, our treatment plants, our in-house lab operations, and any treatment-related facility management. Few facts about her area: our lab runs more than 26,400 tests each year in our in-house lab, and our staff collects samples from 155 different distribution sample sites each month. Tom Edge is our General Counsel and Manager of Legal Compliance and Regulatory Affairs. He provides legal counsel and guidance to the board and management team of the district on all legal matters that are relevant to any two large public institutions, including personnel-related law, real estate, contracts, tax, insurance, public monies, and our procurement. Kim Clemens is our Director of Human Resources, Communications, Facilities, and Fleet. She has direct oversight of our human resource functions, oversees our safety guidelines and standards, emergency operations, obviously the management of our facilities and fleet, and then most recently, our communications and public outreach department. It is a new position, a new initiative for the district, and so that is now in her area. Chris Bryant is responsible for overseeing our informational technology and our operational technology. Information technology includes things like servers, infrastructure, end user support, cybersecurity. Our operational technology includes things like our SCADA system, which stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition, Industrial Control Systems, Access Control, and Surveillance Systems. And if I didn't mention it in his title, he's the Director of Technology, Innovation, and Business Intelligence. Our governance, we do have 6 Board of Commissioners. They are appointed by the judge executives in both Kenton and Campbell counties. We have 4 commissioners from Kenton County and 2 commissioners from Campbell County. They are a policy setting board. They help us to set our vision, mission, and policies for the district. And then my role is to carry out the day-to-day and make sure that their vision is implemented throughout the organization. We are very heavily regulated. One of our regulating agencies is the US EPA, United States of Environmental Public Agencies. They set water standards that we must follow. So the information they put out, their mandates they put out, they're not optional. So they regulate what then we must implement. Some of their mandates are funded at the federal level. Some may be partially funded, and some may be unfunded, in which case you may hear the term unfunded mandate. The Kentucky Public Service Commission also regulates us in a different branch. They ensure that our rates are fair, just, and reasonable. So we do not set our rates independently. Our board, as I mentioned, is a policy setting board. If we have to issue a note for construction, we can only issue that up to 2 years. If we want to take out a longer note, we have to go to Frankfurt, ask for approval, and then they will ask us to justify our rates to make sure we can pay off those loans. They further review the legitimacy of our project. So if we have a large project over a certain amount, we have to go to Frankfurt and they will approve those projects. Lastly, we have the Kentucky Environment and Energy Cabinet, which is the Division of Water. So their certification authority is in charge of the laboratory certification for all drinking water and wastewater labs in the state of Kentucky. So we perform proficiency testing on all certified parameters, and then the results are sent to Division of Water for review. So EPA sets the rules, we collect and analyze the water, and then the results are sent to Division of Water, and they keep track to ensure that we're in compliance. They can perform audits on our lab. They can also conduct sanitary surveys on our treatment plants and our distribution systems. A little bit about our structure. We're chartered under Chapter 74 of the Kentucky Revised Statute. We are the largest water district in the state of Kentucky, third largest water provider. So essentially what that means, Louisville Water is a city-owned utility. They service approximately 1 million customers. Lexington is serviced by Kentucky American Water. They are an investor-owned utility. They serve about 500,000 customers or so. Northern Kentucky Water District is the third largest water provider, but we're a district in that we are not city-owned, we're not investor-owned. We are really the merger of 18 water entities over the past 8 years. Here's a breakdown of the cities that used to have their own water facilities. Then they became Campbell County Water District, Kenton County Water District, and then we came together to form Northern Kentucky Water District. And really, when you form these districts, it's to achieve, economies of scale. Here's a map of our service area. The Northern Kentucky Water District service area is shown in blue, and then we do wholesale to Walton and Bullock Penn and Hamilton County Water. So our, as we service them, it's just through a transmission water main pipe to a point of delivery to get it down to those customers. But our water district domains that we are responsible for would be included in that blue shaded area. So a few more interesting facts about us. We have 229 square service miles that we service, over 85,000 active accounts, which equates to about 300,000 customers served. We do service those customers with approximately 176 employees, about $66 million in operating revenue with a $263 million 5-year capital budget. Our average demand is 26 million gallons per day, or MGD. We have 3 water pump stations, 3 treatment plants, 13 pump stations, 19 storage tanks, and 13 roughly 100 miles of water main. Here's a breakdown of our 2023 5-year capital budget, and you can see here that the majority of the $263 million we have budgeted, the majority is for infrastructure replacement. And we'll talk a little bit more as we go on about our aging mains and our water main replacement program. So keeping all those statistics in mind, number of bills, number of customers, the employees, our service area, you can purchase 200 gallons of water for less than you can buy 1 cup of coffee. So when you think about, you're getting up in the morning, you're brushing your teeth, you're, taking a shower, eating breakfast, doing all your laundry, running your dishwasher, think about all of the times that you use your tap water during the day, in addition to just, taking a drink. That daily cost is about $1.48 a day for our average customer. So we really need to break that. All right, we'll transition and switch gears into our water treatment process. We do have 3 raw water pump stations. Ohio River Pump Station 1, we commonly refer to as WARPS 1. It was built in 1997. It averages about 22 million gallons a day. Ohio River Pump Station 2, WARPS 2, it was built back in 1872, so it's about 150 years old. It averages about 4 to 5 million gallons per day. And then the Licking River Pump Station, it was built in the 1950s, and it averages about 3 to 4 million gallons per day. The Licking River Pump Station is considered our peaking plant. So we typically only run that from April to November when water demand is at its highest. So in the winter, the community is only being serviced from the Ohio River instead of the Licking. Sometimes we get the question as to whether or not water shortage is a concern in our issue. And no, we live in a very water-rich portion of the country. We do not see the same concerns that communities out west, along the Colorado River, the media around that. We do have an abundance of water, and so we have no water shortage concerns here. The raw water pump stations then pump that water up to our 3 treatment plants. So our Fort Thomas treatment plant is a 44 million, can treat up to 44 million gallons per day. It's our largest plant. Memorial Parkway can treat 10 million gallons per day, and Taylor Mill can also treat 10 million gallons per day. So here's just a map to give you a general overview to sort of tie those pump stations to the treatment plant. So you can see Ohio River Pump Station 1 pumps to Fort Thomas, Works 2 pumps to Memorial, and then down the Licking River Pump Station pumps here over to our Taylor Mill treatment plant. Okay, our treatment process can really be broken down into 3 phases. So this is just a very high-level overview of how we treat the water. In phase 1, the water is pumped off of either the Ohio or the Licking. It's pulled into a pre-treatment building, and then it sits in raw water storage where it can sit there, and then the heavy sediments can sort of settle out. Then it goes into a phase 2, a clarification and filtration process, where rapid mixing is involved. Additional sedimentation, heavy particles can settle out in those areas. And then it goes through a filtration process. Phase 3, it goes into our advanced treatment and disinfection. We do have granular activated carbon, commonly referred to as GAC. And then it goes into our UV disinfection process, and then a final disinfection process before it goes out as finished water to our customers. One thing I would like to point out is that our raw water storage is a critical component of our treatment process, especially when spills come down the river. So during the East Palestine train derailment, you may have heard the media around, that Northern Kentucky Water was going to turn off the intakes. And essentially what that meant was that our pump stations that were along the river, we just didn't pump, and then we were able to store water in those raw water storage areas. So then we could let the spill flow by. So we weren't pumping in any contaminant off the Ohio. Here are some examples of our water storage tanks in our system. We do have 19 storage tanks. The first one is a leg tank type of storage tank. The second is a pedosphere style. Then you have a fluted or a skirt tank, and then finally a ground storage tank. So you may see any of these. And really, the reason we have so many different styles, if you recall, we're the merger of 18 different water utilities. So we didn't tear down or rebuild their infrastructure. So this would have been a result of that. And then further, if we were to build a new storage tank, there's a lot of different factors as to why we may choose one style over another. For instance, the volume of water needed, the size of the lot, the location, and just the economics at the time. What are the costs associated with building it now? What would be the maintenance costs of a particular tank in the future? So there's really no one size fits all to a water tank as to why we may choose one over another. And then from here, the finished water travels through our water mains and then into your homes and businesses. So that's our background, and now we'll switch into the challenges we face. So 3 of our major challenges are aging infrastructure, unfunded mandates, and emerging contaminants. And unfunded mandates are really EPA said something, and then it may either be partially funded or unfunded at the federal level. Other challenges that we are experiencing, obviously, most organizations know are workforce issues, supply chain issues, but those are common to all businesses at this time. So we'll focus mainly on these 3 areas. So aging infrastructure. A major component of our aging infrastructure is related to our water main lines, but it also includes our water storage tanks, our pump stations. If you recall, Orbs 2, it's a 150-year-old building, so, we have to make sure and maintain that building. And then just our other facilities, our treatment plants, our facility, storage buildings. If we, the value of the 1,300 miles of water main, that would be roughly over $1 billion of replacement cost. And then 388 miles of our water mains are over 50 years old. So here we have a map of our service area, and this includes red dots that shows our water main failures from 2017 to 2021. So we do average about 361 breaks per year, so a little less than on average one a day. And then we do average about 72 leaks per year. You can see a couple pictures down here, what happens when water main does break. The highest year we had for breaks was in 2007 with 592. But when you consider the age of the mains, but then the cost of replacement, you really have to strike a balance between, making sure and working on this issue, and we'll talk about what we've done. So we did implement a water main replacement program, and this shows a graph of the trend line of our water main failure frequency. So the work that we do now, we start to see the payoff, certainly 5, 10, 20 years down the road. So in 1999, we started a water main replacement program, and essentially we calculate the failure rate by combining the number of breaks and leaks, and then we divide that number by the number of miles of main. So depending on the pool of utilities you sample, the average for utilities can be anywhere between 20 and 30 breaks a year per 100 miles. And our average break frequency per 100 miles over the last 5 years was about 33. So older Midwestern, Northeastern utilities like ours do tend to be on the higher end because we have the older pipes in the ground. But you can see here that our continued investment in our water main replacement program definitely shows a downward trend in our main breaks and leaks, even though, when you're experiencing them, it can feel, like we don't have our eye on it, but we do have our eye on it. The spike here in 2007, we had a very long, cold winter, followed by a very hot, dry summer, and really just the shifts in the ground from the freeze thaw can create more water main breaks. That's what happened in 2007. Here are some pictures of our crews working out on our infrastructure. So we do budget about $5 million a year for our water main replacement program. When we can, we seek grants or any kind of low interest rate loans to help us pay for this program. And we further try to coordinate with the cities and counties and the state with their street paving projects so that we can keep everybody's costs low. So we aren't, working in conflict with each other, but in concert. Now we'll switch into unfunded mandates. So remember, EPA sets the rules, and then it's up to the utility to figure out implementation and how are we going to pay for them if it's not funded at the federal level. We'll give a little bit of history here. So a few mandates, which included funded and unfunded portions, were the 1974 Safe Drinking Water Act, and that really set the national drinking water standards. If you go all the way back to the late 1800s, water essentially came straight from the rivers, and really there was not much treatment at all, and then came out of the taps. So there was a typhoid epidemic in the early 1900s, and in 1917, chlorination was added as a disinfectant in response to the typhoid epidemic. Fast forward to the late 90s, there was a stage 1 disinfection byproduct rule that EPA set, but that really didn't change our processes. However, when stage 2 of the disinfection byproduct rule came out in the early 2000s, it did cause us to need to upgrade our water treatment plants, and that is what led us to install that granular activated carbon treatment process at our facilities. And then the lead and copper rule has been around since the early 90s, but more recently there have been lead and copper rule revisions, and we'll talk about what EPA is looking at there. So the lead and copper rule, there are a few phases to it. Phase 1 includes an inventory where all water utilities are required to go out and get an inventory of all lead service lines, actually all service lines, whether lead or not lead. So to give you a little bit of background about lead, when water leaves our treatment plants, it does not contain lead. And when it goes into our storage tanks and out of our water mains, it's not touching lead. Where lead exists in the system may be between the main and the house, whether that are house or business or structure. So that's called the service line that connects the business to the water main. And so lead in drinking water is primarily from materials and parts that are connected to the home plumbing and the service line. So in 1988, the use of lead pipes and lead, any other lead for joining copper piping and fittings, it was banned in the state of Kentucky. But prior to 1988, it's possible, it's uncertain as to whether or not the service line may be made of lead. So if present, elevated levels, it can cause serious health problems, especially for pregnant women and young children. So Northern Kentucky Water District is required to provide treatment that reduces the likelihood that lead will be released from pipes and fixtures. So if you remember, I mentioned that the lead and copper rule back in the early 90s came out. Part of that was that we had to feed, it's called a corrosion inhibitor. And without getting too technical, essentially it's a chemical that we feed that creates a barrier that will line the pipe and then keep any lead that may or may not be present in a pipe from leaching into the water, and it creates a protective barrier. And so that met the lead and copper rule. And then now, since Flint, Michigan, EPA is really taking another look, and they're starting their Get the Lead Out campaign. You may have heard them say, get the lead out in a decade. And so there's been a large push at the federal level to just get all lead out of the service area, even though we are continuing to feed that corrosion inhibitor. So it's ever evolving. Right now, you may see our crews out. You may get letters from us. We are going to start posting things on our website to educate the community, to help us identify your service line material. In the fall of next year, we're going to have a public-facing map, and so there'll be information then that the community members will be able to see about their service line. So we're building that inventory now. So any help the community can help us with that is much appreciated. Now going into emerging contaminants, also ever evolving. The list of emerging contaminants is ongoing and growing. And one of the main important things we'd like to point out is that we can now measure in parts per trillion as compared to parts per billion. So the technologies have gotten so that if you consider a part per billion is 1 second in 32 years. Now we have the ability to measure in parts per trillion, which is 1 second in 32,000 years. So extremely, extremely minute traces of contaminants. And so these contaminants are not just in drinking water, they're in all environments. You've got viruses, bacteria, salts and metals, pesticides, herbicides, pharmaceuticals, personal care products. Some are naturally occurring through, we've got stormwater runoff, wastewater discharges. So there is just a general exposure to contaminants that are in other parts of the environment, not only your drinking water. Some testing for contaminants is regulated. Some are unregulated, but we still have to test for them and turn these results into Division of Water. So because of the upgrades to the testing, EPA now has their work cut out for them to evaluate whether or not there are health effects associated with these compounds that we can find at these very minute levels, and whether regulations are needed for our drinking water around these. So the ability to see them is coming out faster than the ability to really understand what the health effects are. So that's the role of EPA. Sticking with emerging contaminants, you may have seen in the media news articles on forever chemicals. These are chemicals that are essentially doing the job they were created to do. The chemical was created to be water resistant. And so now, as it is water resistant, then you're unable to really, not unable, but it's very difficult to treat it. So PFAS are a group of man-made chemicals used in commercial products. There are two compounds of PFAS, PFOS and PFOA. They were phased out of production in 2015, but they were replaced with other compounds. One of the most common is it's called Gen X. So drinking water, including bottled water, may reasonably be expected to contain these very small amounts of these compounds. We were required to test for them, although they're still unregulated at this time. It was during unregulated testing that we're required to do. We just did that in April of 2023 of this year, and all 29 PFAS compounds that we were asked to test for were below detectable levels. And so, which is great news. And, consider that in the context of how tiny we were testing it down to. So the 29 PFAS compounds were below detect. We will have to continue to test for those. So, nobody has a crystal ball, but our efforts here with our granulated activated carbon is working. So EPA does deem GAC one of the best available technologies for removing PFAS and the 29 PFAS compounds that they are talking about. And then we'll wrap up just by talking about our recent and upcoming projects. So recently, we worked on a generator installation. We do need power to make sure water can flow, even during times when power needs may not be there, or power may not be there. Our water information management solution, our WIM system, this system, it provides enhanced data for our management and operational decisions for the system. You may or may not have seen trucks driving around Fort Thomas. We did have a large mud removal project at one of our treatment plants, and essentially this will just increase our water storage capacity. So during this spill, we really appreciated having all that space to hold the raw water there. So it's important to do that maintenance work and keep those reservoirs cleaned out. We've also done satellite leak detection. So we're trying to more effectively and efficiently see if we can find leaks through any aerial scans. So we have scanned our entire system recently. And then, as I mentioned, we're working on our service line inventory system to track and report service lines and what materials they may be made of. And then lastly, we are working on upgrading our meter reading project. So the advanced metering infrastructure will provide us with more frequent readings, and we should have the ability to see, detect leaks earlier in the system. We have run into some supply chain issues, so that project is going a little slower than we had anticipated, but we're still moving forward on that. If anyone is interested in any projects that we're working on, you can visit our website. And, you can also call us, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about any projects that we're working on. So in conclusion, there are a lot of moving parts at the district. Our mission is to provide our customers a safe, clean, and sufficient water supply through a reliable and interactive system that meets all customer expectations and all state and federal standards. So we do have to remain very mindful of affordability and also delivering, that great water at a reasonable cost. So that is all I have. I'll take time to answer any questions that you might have.
Question, Jim. Richard?
Sanitation bills quarterly?
I'm not sure. I thought sanitation bill monthly. We bill
Quarterly, they bill monthly?
That's right.
Is there any motion of doing what sanitation is doing?
We do have a survey on our website, so if customers want to go on and vote whether or not they prefer monthly versus quarterly, it typically shakes out to be about 60-40 split where people prefer the quarterly bill. So we've always stayed with a quarterly bill since the community has told us that. There would be increased cost, for instance, postage and then just collecting those reads. Our current meter reading system includes, it's called a drive-by system, where somebody has to get in a truck and then drive by. So if we were to switch to monthly billing, it would drive our overhead up to try to get that. So cost and then community interest and those types of things, we haven't really pushed forward. We haven't made a good business case as to why we would want to switch to monthly billing at this point, but it's never totally off the table. So we're just, we would look at it
Duke has a method of measuring remotely without the drive-by.
Yes.
Is that a potential here?
So our AMI system, our advanced metering infrastructure system is going to be relatively similar. So once we get that project fully rolled out, and again, we bumped into supply chain issues, so it's not going as fast as we had hoped. But once we get the project totally rolled out, then we will have the ability to see those readings, without having to drive by. And it'll be similar, yes. But we'll have to change our internal business processes, and yeah, it'll all take time.
You mentioned all your water intake apparently is coming from rivers.
Mm-hmm.
Sanitation does not feed water into the water system
They do. You mean from they treat
of
it,
their treatment plants.
but they have to treat it before it goes into the Ohio. So they have their own processes that they have to follow before it goes into the Ohio.
Just thinking though that there is a recycling process in the sense of water already.
Right. Sure.
You had that map with all those red dots where stuff is broken. What typically causes all those breaks?
Weather. So we have a scoring system. I think there are 12 different criteria that we look at is to determine whether or not we will replace a main. And factors can include, the age of the main, those types of things. But really what we see is when you have a snap cold or, a sort of sudden drought, anything that's really doing anything to the dirt and the soil, it causes those shifts, it'll break the main. So that's what happened in '07 when you had a very, very cold winter, followed by a very hot, dry summer. We had over 500 water main breaks, and that's really just out of our control.
Lindsey, could you talk a little bit about our capacity? And I'm wondering when companies are looking to locate in Northern Kentucky, what questions do you get from them? Do we have the capacity for more employers? Maybe the Amazon construction is a good case study.
Yeah, so it's important to remember there are a couple of different types of capacity. So there's a production capacity, but then there's also a transmission capacity. So you have to be able to not only have the capacity to pull the water in and treat it, you have to have the infrastructure built to transmit it and push it out to the customer. There are also factors as to elevation, the size of mains that are already existing there, as to what the water needs would be. I know I mentioned earlier about the Public Service Commission. When we go to take projects to the Public Service Commission, they will they'll look at, why are you building this project? So they want to make sure that, if we're doing an upgrade to the water main or we're building a water main, that there's either a current or, an existing need. When we build mains, we don't have the ability to, sort of build a main out to an open area that doesn't have a user on it, because you have to be able to pull the water through the main to keep the main fresh, and we have to maintain that infrastructure. So there's a lot of different things that would, factors that would go into whether or not we, would be able to either build new or upgrade or anything with our to meet that transmission capacity. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, Amazon, we're all set for that.
So I want to say Amazon is in Boone. Aren't they? Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody else's problem.
Yeah. Well, not their problem. Yeah, but yes, they're so we mainly service Kent and Campbell. We do service portions of Boone, but I want to say Amazon, was built.
It might be helpful just to let the audience know, majority of Boone County water is through a pipeline from the Cincinnati Water Works. Is that
That's correct. Yes. So Boone County, so it's called the Boone Florence Water Commission. They're over Boone County Water and the city of Florence Water. And there is a pipe that gets pumped from Greater Cincinnati Water Works under the Ohio into Boone County. That's correct.
Maybe a little bit of a follow-up or related question on that. You mentioned during your talk that we are water rich, so to speak, and other parts of the country are not.
Yes.
Is there any discussion nationally, I think you mentioned you're on a national board of exporting water from here to other parts of the country.
There have been discussions, certainly. Again, a lot of it goes back to cost and then, reliability and redundancy. So when you consider, if you have water in one particular area and you need it all the way across the country, the logistics involved and the cost involved in digging a water main that long, and then you wouldn't only be able to dig and build one pipe, you would need some type of redundancy. So when you consider the logistics of all of it, it really
Might not be $1.48 a day.
right.
On a question from one of our online attendees, I occasionally still see advertisements to dispose of medication by flushing it down the toilet. Can you speak to why this is not how people should dispose of their medication?
Great question. Yes, so anything that goes down the toilet, in the sink, in the washing machine, it does have to be treated by the sanitation district, and it does, so that impacts sanitation more than it would impact us, because sanitation has their own requirements they would have to meet to be able to treat that before it gets discharged into the river. But anything, that people can do to protect our source water is certainly to the benefit of the community.
And one other question on rates, that $1.48. Wonder how do we stack up as our water district regionally, statewide, nationally? Are we kind of in the middle, or more expensive, or cheap, or?
We're sort of in the middle. So if you put us on a graph and compare us to other utilities, in the state or in our area or in our region, we do sort of fall right in the middle. We're not the most expensive. We're not the cheapest, right?
One last chance. Any questions? Things you haven't?
Security. What are you watching for security-wise? Contamination to the water or something blowing up?
Yes, and yes, all of it. Yeah. So we do have an emergency response plan. There was, we just updated, it's called OWIA. It's an acronym. I can't think of the definition of OWIA at this point. But in 2019, we updated it, and it spoke to those things that you're talking about. So we do have surveillance cameras. We don't publicize the actual location of, where exactly a water main may be. So we try to, we talk in generalities as to treatment processes and things, but we don't share publicly that information to make sure it stays protected. And so, we're very, very aware of the system, and we have a close eye on our facilities to pay attention to security. Does that answer your question? Or?
Yes, you've heard in the media that people are blowing up power facilities and having those, and so I assume that you guys are worried about the same thing.
I don't know, worried, but we are aware. So yeah, we're, we don't think that can't happen to us, but we do have, plans in place, and surveillance cameras and alarms and control access and, different things that would certainly reduce the likelihood.
Lindsey, before we close, one thing I want to do is be sure to say thank you to the students from North Media. They are students at NKU, and they're studying electronic media broadcast. And they make the streaming and recording of this event possible. Remind the audience that if you'll be able to watch a recording of this and share it with friends, and just visit the NKYForum.org site. And you'll also be able to see our upcoming events, including those media dialogues, and we'd love to have your voice as part of that. I want to thank everybody and ask the audience to say thank you to Lindsey. It's been an informative morning.